assessment in the junior highs to help figure out what your strengths and interests are kind of become what the SEL focus is in the high school settings.
The other piece I would add to that is the high school says Hope Squad, which isn't directly SEL, but is, I would say, in the realm of SEL.
Yeah. Okay, and now with Hope Squad, I know that's not really on here, but when it comes to Hope Squad, are certain kids picked for that, or is that something that all kids have an opportunity to be a part of?
A little bit of both.
Yeah, so.
Okay.
Yeah, students are picked, but we also have opportunities for students who are not selected to be a part of that, which includes, we now have a course for Hope Squad 2 that brings in more students to be a part and kind of learn that framework.
Thank you.
And one of the core pieces of Hope Squad is peer nomination, because the goal is to have students on the Hope Squad team who are representative of all students.
It's other students' trust, which is important for Hope Squad to function in the capacity it does.
And that's essentially what the nomination says. It says, you know, if you had an issue and wanted to talk to a peer, who would you talk to? And they circle names, and that's how they kind of come up with the Hope Squad members.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
And then the only other thing I'll mention there is we do have some, you know, newer state laws that have come into play that tie in a little bit with SEL2. House Bill 123, which has a lot to do with prevention. Then there's Aaron's Law that's more about dating violence and abuse prevention and those kind of things. So those are coming on too and have some requirements in grades 7 through 12 also.
Okay, now have we started that yet, or is that brand new?
Well, they're both brand new, but Aaron's Law we haven't implemented yet. House Bill 123 we just started at the beginning of this school year. And just so you know, that we do have a website dedicated to House Bill 123 that outlines all the activities. So we're required to do 3 hours of training per year in grades 6 through 12 around suicide prevention, violence prevention, and social inclusion. And the state gives us programs that we need to use, and you can kind of see on our website everything that our teachers see is available on the website. And there is an opt-out process, so parents can also opt out if they need to.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that.
No problem.
Lori, will you read that list again, please?
Yep. Consistency in math curriculum, science of reading, support of SEL, more opportunities, electives, specials, etc., class size, too much testing, and more support for teachers.
I'd like to add to that list the AP classes and the college career readiness.
There were definitely a bunch of conflicts.
I was glad it took me all the way to 206 out of 309 to get to CCAT is a waste of time.
Was that you?
I'm glad that was so low.
Was that?
No, that was not me.
Well, there's quite a few.
Well,
There was a couple at the very top, which means they were voted on quite a few times about how we teach history in classrooms.
There were a number
Diversity,
of comments
history.
about that.
And that's the second one on there.
Number 2 and number 7 both talked about
And
that.
I got pretty far down, and you continue to see it usually.
Okay. Any other big topics? So the hope of today was to identify some big themes, which I think we've done, to help us kind of set some priorities as a team. So that's kind of our next question would be, you know, do any of these stick out to you as areas that we would want to dig into more? We can certainly bring back at our next meeting, you know, more information. Yeah, go ahead.
I think when in looking at this, some of it applies more to elementary versus middle and high school. But when I think of the core education like math and reading for those K through 6 kids, like what is going on, because that prepares them for the rest, like I think that's something to look at. And class size throughout for everybody. And then for testing and like the history class and all that stuff and AP classes, I think that's gonna be more of the older kids, but I think Like, is our focus just gonna be one for everything? Is there gonna be grade like K through 6 and then 7 through 12? Because I see these falling in different categories to a certain
Right.
degree.
And that's
So-
where it would have been helpful to organize them by grade bands, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it actually cleared itself up by the things that we got out of it, actually. A lot of it is very, you're specific to certain age groups that you can see there.
And I think, you know, the answer to that is whatever we want it to be.
Okay.
So if we wanna break things up and kind of handle it in different ways, or, you know, tackle things in an order of some way, we can definitely do that. So definitely some K-6 core conversation about math and reading.
Yeah, that's what I took from it, and the SEL, but the SEL is overwhelmingly positive, so I don't know, are we gonna look at all of it no matter what, or are we gonna look at things that might be challenges right now in curriculum?
And one of the things about SEL that's a challenge is we do have these standards that come from the state of Ohio, which we could bring those back and review those and look into those a little bit. But you know, when math standards come from the state, it's easily known that the math teacher is going to teach the math standards. But SEL, there wasn't really guidance as far as who owns those standards. So they've been kind of blended in multiple places. We try to use some non-academic times to build in some lessons and things like that, activities. We use peer-to-peer programming in the junior highs and high schools. We could certainly bring kind of a rundown to the team of all the elements that we have going on that we could talk about.
Maybe I said that wrong, with SEL, do we need to focus on it if it's
Oh,
positive?
I see what you're saying. I see
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah. Not that
Question.
we don't have to, but I'm saying some of these are just
Mhm.
great comments, so what do we wanna focus on, those elements that came up high, or those elements that came up as issues
As
high
needs.
because of their negative, they have a negative impact, whereas it's those that have, based on the survey, a positive or impact
Good point.
based on it. So that's what I'm trying to ask, which things do we wanna focus on?
Vanessa, did you have a comment?
No, a question actually. Lori, you said that you do have some of the standards that are coming down from the state. Is that something that could be shared with us?
Yes, I could send those out to you.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
And you have the website for it, right?
Yeah, that's what
Okay.
I would share, yeah.
Okay.
Getting to your point of earlier, Lori, about how SEL is taught or who's responsible for it, I mean, it was much lower in the list, but there were questions like, you know, who is qualified to teach SEL, things like that, so at least some folks
Yeah.
were wondering about that. But I think if we examined it, we would definitely wanna look at what's working so well, in addition to how could we improve it, because obviously people are, at least the people who answered this survey are loving it, for the most part.
Yeah, we could definitely bring some things back on that.
I don't know if it's the top priority, but just again, me personally, I'm a little curious about what people are on about on the consistency in the math curriculum. I'd just like to know more about that, because I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, we can dig into that and bring some information back next time.
Yeah, and I think, again, I mean, I know we're trying to decide, you know, how we're going to, what we're going to look at, but when I think about college and career readiness, to me, it's the core function of high school. And, you know, looking at that and moving folks into, students into what's gonna work, I think in part that has to be part of something we're really looking at across the board.
And we have a lot of activity going on in that area, so I know we would be happy to bring some of that here and have conversations about that and get some input from you guys. So I'm seeing maybe a focus on math and reading, college and career readiness, and then maybe an overview of what's going on in SEL, just to top it off or to have a conversation about that.
Are some of these frequent categories outside of our purview? Like smaller class sizes?
Yeah, they're just
I mean,
not within our 20 square feet of what we can control.
Yeah, I'm all for smaller class sizes, but I don't know if the curriculum department has
Right.
anything to do with that. And,
I've proposed class size of 5, but I.
Propose anything we want.
Yeah, it's,
I
And
think a
we-
few fall under that kind
And
of.
we can bring any information back just about certain things, like if you wanted to know anything about class sizes, we can bring the information back, but yeah, I don't think it's something we would necessarily have control over, so.
But that is a good point though about just the information.
Mhm.
I think just being able to share, information to be able to answer the questions and how that might impact things, I think are things we can do in this meeting.
Okay, anything else around these? And I encourage you again to, I know this is kind of a novel that we've printed out for you here, but if you want to take a look through the rest of the comments and see if there's anything we missed, in the minutes, I'll put this list of things that we identified as our core themes. And then kind of the few focus areas we picked from those core themes will be in our minutes. And then we can always add to and have more discussion about it at the next meeting if we missed anything.
I have one question.
Sure.
And I know I'm just going through the first couple pages and I have marked a lot. What about the electives? Should we look at that and see, because that was a very common theme, I thought, as well.
That might be good for us to go over just an overview of what's offered K-12.
It's making me wonder if we should kind of do a rundown of all of these, just give you some context for each one of them and some further information, and then we can dig in from there too. That can be the
Yeah.
proactive stuff we bring back next time.
Mhm.
'Cause that's a good point.
Yeah, and I'm thinking too, just because something came up frequently, and I realize it's part of why we did the inquiry,
Mhm.
but I'm looking here at this question in maybe reading more or not enough into it, but the importance that teachers have in flexibility to be responsive to student needs. And I don't know if it was the last meeting that we had or the one prior to the last meeting, where we had talked about the fact that teachers have an awful lot of autonomy in the classroom for deciding what gets taught. I'm not sure that, one, I really understand that fully, what that means to the education process if we're trying to meet standards of learning. Two, what it means if there's a curriculum that's in place, and how much of the resources the teachers had opportunity to select that wasn't part of the curriculum, which to me is a big deal. If they have a lot of freedom in selecting curriculum, why does the curriculum committee go through the time of saying these are the resources or this is the curriculum for this particular age or whatever? I guess in essence, while it's not necessarily a high item, to me it's one of concern.
Talk about.
To at least bring onto the table for how that is both decided and monitored.
I like that too, I agree.
So when you're saying they're deciding the curriculum, unless I'm misunderstanding, they're given the curriculum with resources and they can access those resources that you guys have. And sometimes, for the most part, those resources are coming from what you guys say is available to them. They're not just pulling stuff out of the air to say, we're gonna use this. Is that correct? So it's not really teachers going out and saying, oh, I wanna use this book, I wanna use this book. Those things are part of what you guys have said. This is what we think is age appropriate. These are the things we have. That's why they have like 30 books for a classroom. So, or they have, 2 teachers using different books. It might be 6 different selections of books, but for them to have all the resources they have for a whole classroom, it has to come from the curriculum team, because they don't have those resources to go out and buy 30 books or 50 of this or 20 of this. So I think that's like, they have access to them, but they have choices in that curriculum of what they use in the classroom.
I understood that, and what I'm saying is that it concerned me that there wasn't a little bit more that was directed in terms of what was available. That's a vast array, and based on the comments from that discussion that we had before, it seemed to me that I understood that teachers had a lot more freedom in deciding that than, at least in that moment, that I was comfortable with.
Do the teachers, I thought you guys said the teachers, am I right, if I'm wrong, tell me, do they send a letter home for parents to know what they're usually gonna read though, most teachers do, or no?
So if it's a whole class book, for example, and feel free to jump in, guys, they would know, the parents would know what that book is and those different things. And I mean, there is a balance there because we do provide resources, scope and sequence, all these documents that tell a teacher, here's how you work through meeting these standards. So they do follow the curriculum, but there is for example, that a teacher might read an article in the newspaper and talk about that in class to meet a standard. Those kind of things, there's some autonomy there. But by and large, we, use our department budget to buy resources for teachers, and we want them to use those resources.
Because even with my son now, he hasn't done any reading in his class now that the teacher didn't send home in advance that I saw. Now, I don't know if every kid shares that with their parent, but my kid now has not read anything at school that wasn't brought home in any of his classes that I wasn't informed of.
Anything you guys want to add?
Yeah,
And he's in high school.
In the secondary space, majority of the classes are whole textbook, and then the teachers will do some what are either called lit circles or book club models, but all those are not just free whatever you want. Those are pre-selected books, and all those books have they're either on our list or they are on or they've given permission slips. And always have permission slips come home. I can't think of scenarios in which they wouldn't do that.
Thank you. I was gonna ask that too.
I would say the same for K-6. I think in addition to that, at K-6, most teachers are sending home weekly newsletters that outline specifically what they're learning in each subject area, what books they're using, what resources they're using. So that's another way for parents to be informed about what their children are learning in class.
Now, can I ask a question? Because I know a lot of parents have had issues with Hack or Canvas, or maybe just finding their way around both of those websites. So is this information going up on those two sites, and I'm not sure if that's K-6 or if that's just the high school, or are teachers actually sending a letter home in some cases? I guess I hope I'm wording that right.
I would say in K-6, they're sending emails home with the newsletter attached to the email each week. It may be different at the secondary because they're a little bit more.
My son brings papers home that they're supposed to share with their parent.
In most cases, it's paper.
And most of it is, I sign it or I look at it and say, well, yeah, but I'm talking about the high school, so I can't speak for.
Okay.
And we've talked, Vanessa, about having sessions for parents about how to access Canvas, how to access Hack, and use all the resources within there. That would be a good thing to revisit for us.
And even at curriculum night, they went over all the books for my son. They went over all the books that were going to be covered throughout the year, and I kind of took note which books were going to be for each class. So each teacher, when I did curriculum night, did review all the information as far as textbooks or readings that they would be using in those classes.
That's great.
What kind of attendance does curriculum night get?
I mean, my kids don't go. I went to curriculum night for all three of my kids, and elementary is a lot heavier or attended. But I would say that even I attended fourth grade, and it was probably only half at best. And then at high school, I would say
It was
maybe 3 families per every class, and I know for a fact that there's a whole lot more than 3 kids in that class.
I would say in elementary it is a packed house. I mean, a lot of them are holding them in the cafeteria because they can't fit in the classroom.
Yeah.
So.
And I would say that makes me remember in our notes from a previous meeting, I had written the question, how do we communicate all of this information to parents more effectively, so if curriculum night is yielding in the high schools very few people, then maybe that's.
And you remember when I went to curriculum night, and I remember I texted you, I was pleasantly surprised by the amount of consistency, because we try to work on consistency with our teachers. I was like, well, it's nice to see it as a parent, right? But you would only see that if you showed up to curriculum night. And the teachers were really good about sharing, I think, I shouldn't say all the things, but most of the things that you brought up in the past conversation.
Diane, your question made me think about, because I thought that was a valid concern about, consistency and where are the guard lines and guardrails and so forth. But in my experience, what I've noticed is that the best teaching happens like in a sweet spot between something that is totally prescribed and just, rote, paint by number, and then the Wild West of do whatever you want. So sort of finding that middle place where you can differentiate and meet the needs of everyone in the classroom, but you still have enough support to know where you're going and why and all of that. So I don't know that it's always just totally a matter of are we following everything rote, but where are we on that continuum that teaching works best?
And I guess to that point, which I appreciate, is then that final evaluation, at least from the state perspective in the testing of then, is it working? Where the teachers have the flexibility and more flexibility, is that yielding higher test scores, or is it yielding lower or the same? And I don't know if that's something in our, I don't want to say purview, but that we would be able to analyze and evaluate. But, if the test scores are heading one direction or another, is there a correlation that we can look at and say, oh, there's flexibility here, or this is what is happening?
And we've been looking at that pretty closely because of what you just said. I mean, I know, for example, model courses that our secondaries have been working on and refining over the past couple of years since COVID. We kind of looked at, the teachers that follow, we know they follow those model courses very closely versus the teachers not so closely. Our teachers that follow them closely have better test results than those that don't. So that is something we are pushing hard on to get more consistent usage of what we provide.
That's really good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate that too. That's kind of
And it's a challenge. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's a challenge. Yeah. Getting 2,000 teachers, and being able to monitor the fidelity of that and keep all of our resources up to date and be responsive to how they're affecting student progress, those kind of things. It's a conversation we have a lot.
I would say, I appreciate your question, because that question is often at the center of a lot of conversations. And just think about that, like all the conversations I have with parents, and rarely do you get a parent, like to your point, that says, I want my child treated exactly the same as everybody else, and even though they're exceptional, I don't want anything exceptional, and even though they need support, I don't want more support, I want it exactly the same, I want cookie cutter. Like, I never have parents say that. They want education that fits their kids' needs. Well, at the same time, we also hear things like, I want more consistent. I see this happening over here. How come it's not happening over here, right? And that's, I think, we hear both sides, and trying to make sure that we navigate that, I think, is, as you've described, is a critical question that we should have our eyes on.
I would say too, the definite difference between the secondary and the elementary model courses is at the secondary level, they're student facing. At the elementary level, they're teacher facing. And every unit that they teach comes with a day-by-day daily instructional guide. And the guide talks about, here's what the students should be learning, here's the purpose of this lesson, and here's the materials that you should be using. So like Lori explained with the model courses, that's something that we're pushing with our teachers much harder than we ever have before. And the teachers that are building that are the teachers who have our best test scores and have seen the best results with their students in the classroom.
That's great.
So that's definitely something that we've worked hard on.
kudos. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate that. And I appreciate the reminder that there's 2,000 teachers out there.
Mm-hmm.
1,000.
Thousand.
We have 1,000.
Okay,
I
1,000. I'm
misspoke.
sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I said it wrong the
Still,
first time.
1,000.
But hearing you
know,
say it, I was like, wait a second.
1,000.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the reminder and that effort. Where are you focusing right now? Andrew, you've got the upper, right?
Yeah.
And you have the K through 6.
ELA math.
Same.
Pardon?
ELA math. English maths. Yeah.
Tested core areas.
I would
Easy.
say the same for a lot of the reasons that are outlined in here. So it's actually really nice to see that the folks that filled these surveys out are in tune enough to understand where our needs really do lie. The science of reading research that has come out has provided us as an elementary some pretty concrete foundational expectations as far as what students are learning and how they're learning it when it comes to reading. So we have spent a lot of time over the last year really diving in and figuring out what are we really great at teaching, what do we need a little bit more support in teaching, what resources are really showing us great result, and which resources are not, so that we can focus our attention on the ones that are. And actually, math is something that is on our radar this current year, because our math curriculum hasn't been updated in years. It's currently teacher written, unit by unit, and this year we would like to spend some time looking more deeply into some of the curriculums out there to provide us a more solid foundation. That's something that our teachers have been sharing with us for the last couple of years.
Those responses make more sense.
Yeah, especially because they're coming from staff members, so.
Uh-huh.
Okay, great conversation, great questions. I think what I'm thinking for our next meeting plan is these theme areas that we've identified, that maybe we can bring a little bit of information about each one of these to kind of flesh them out a little bit more, and then we can also choose some specific areas that we want to get deeper into. Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else on the thought exchange, the topics, anything like that?
Just a comment that goes along with, and maybe you said this and I'm missing it because it's, but along with just kind of the descriptions and bringing those topics to bear, it might be helpful to have a little bit more narrative of the focus of what is being done. Like, I appreciated this, and it's a lot, but in those areas, to say, hey, here's what we have been doing. I'm not trying to make work.
Oh no, we have
That's
that out
pretty
there
easy
already.
to share, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
It just might be helpful for us then as we look
yeah,
at it.
it's, there would be no
So
extra
it's
work.
just like our focus areas for
Yeah.
this year and the work that we're, yeah. That's a good
Because we
idea.
don't want to start, reinventing a wheel that's
Sure.
already in motion.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We could do that. Okay. So again, please read through the rest of the comments and come back with, or you can email if you have any things that you wanted to add, or you can bring it back to our next meeting, and we will dig into those a little further the next time. The only other issue or item under this proactive targeted curriculum section is we talked about in June having a community conversation after this thought exchange. So maybe it would percolate some topics that we could then transition into a community conversation. So we did submit that request to that committee that oversees the community conversations. And they do have us on the docket, but I believe it's for January. So it will be a little while before we actually have that, but we can start at our next meeting giving some input and planning for what that could look like, and what we're looking to gain out of that community conversation. So I wanted to give you a follow-up there that we are, I'll get you the date. I think it's January 8th, but I might be making that date up, so let me check. Any questions or feedback about that?
What would we need to, what parameters would we need to define prior to that, like, just so we can be thinking ahead?
So typically, I think it can be wherever we want it to be, but typically they've been very broad in the question and generating conversation. So the questions that we ask for the thought exchange are typically like the questions they ask at a community conversation, to just start the conversation. What's a positive thing, what's a negative thing, what would you like to see moving forward, kind of thing. So it could be more general like that, or if we narrowed in on an area that we wanted to look in more deeply, we could design some questions around that and go that way. And we've done them a little different based on the topics. Sometimes there's been like a little mini presentation first, and then we kind of dive into some questions, and sometimes they just dive right into the questions. So this group could definitely give input to the community conversation team to say, here's how we'd like to see that go, or here's what we're looking to gain out of that.
Lori, that date is January 9th.
Oh, perfect, I was close.
That's pretty bad. When was the last time curriculum was brought into the community conversation formally?
Was there one last year?
Last year.
Was there? Okay, last year.
Can I ask the audience?
Phone a friend?
Yeah, yeah, what was the content? Was it around something specific?
It was very general. Correct. It
Like
was-
the questions
It was a
I
very
just-
general,
Okay,
what you like to see, what you like, what you don't like, type.
so last year, okay.
Last
thank-
school year.
Oh, last school year.
Mhm.
Oh, that's fine, yeah, thank you.
This may be more work, but I think that community conversation is good, but should it be broken up in K through 6 and then 7 through 12? Because the focus can be different, or should it all be combined?
It's a good question.
I like that question too.
Because that's where my mind is going, but I don't know if that makes sense as far as how the curriculum works, but I know one leads to the
Yeah,
next.
I think it would make sense for how it works. My fear would be the same as curriculum nights, is that at the 7-12 conversation, it would be us.
That's a good point.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's just a
That is a
fear.
very
you
good
know,
point.
But I'm supportive of the idea, but just
Okay,
concerned about
And
the
I'll put
That's
that
very
in the
good point.
notes, we'll keep talking about that,
Yeah.
though. That's a good question.
You could also divide it up after you see who shows up.
Mhm.
That's
a
true.
good
You
point.
have- if you
Just
have
have
everybody-
everybody-
That's a good point,
here for
yeah.
both.
And if there's not enough people, we can just combine them together.
Mhm.
It's a good idea.
Good idea.
You could also break it up within the community conversation.
Like
Oh,
45
separate
minutes or-
them.
Well, just simultaneously. just-
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, good idea. Okay, so thank you. Any other questions about community conversation? Or our next, we're doing the every 2-month meeting, so we would be shooting for November, so that would be a good time to talk about the community conversation, more specific planning. Moving on to the concern review process, so our proactive and kind of reactive components of our agenda. Last time we were here, we reviewed, and I just wanted to bring it up so you could see it on our Lakota Listens website. We, under the curriculum piece, our newly revised Google form is live and has been live since June. Since we posted it, there have not been any entries yet. So every time that we meet, we will bring anything that comes on that report back. And we probably need to do, I know we've talked to a few parents, we can encourage them to go through the form to report out, anything. I'm looking at you guys because I'm thinking maybe we can encourage that if we get questions to say, can you fill it out in the form so that we can bring it to this forum and have that conversation. Yeah, any questions about that process or?
Yeah, glad.
No, I'm glad to know that's up. So then if there are concerns or things that we hear in the community, we can tell someone to go there and then do the report. Okay, thank you.
Yep, that's a great suggestion. That's one way that you guys can be helpful out in the community is if you do hear things, please encourage them to go to that Google form and share that with us so that we can look into it and report back to you all, and that's a great way to help.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the reactive part of the agenda? Okay, this is gonna be the hardest part of the meeting, setting a
November
date
date.
for November.
Seriously.
So why don't we take a look if you have your calendars out. And if we can't find something, I'm happy to send out a doodle, as we've done before, to get common dates together. I know there was a request from a community member to avoid board meeting nights so that people could attend both if they needed to do that, so we'll avoid a board meeting.
Well, we don't have everybody here either, we don't have Ian.
That's true. Would it be better if I just sent a doodle out with some
You
dates?
could probably just at least come up with some dates. and
Okay.
You could probably then limit, and then if you can't do any of them, then
Okay.
you can go back to the drawing board, it'll make life easier for you,
Okay.
I think anyway.
We, the last time we sent out a doodle, it was kind of Monday through Thursday evenings. We threw out a bunch of those. So if there's any dates that look good to you or definitely don't
Which
work.
dates do the board meet in November, do you guys know?
I see November 6th.
Okay.
I think that's the only one in November. And then we do have, Thanksgiving break in there.
I would say the only day is the 13th, because the 20th is the week of Thanksgiving, and the 27th, people may not be back if they go
Mhm.
elsewhere. Not
Yeah,
to
so
say
maybe
that-
the week of the
but
13th.
Yeah.
The week of the 13th.
Mhm.
Any big no-nos on that week?
I have a commitment Tuesday night, the 14th.
Okay.
So 13, 15, and 16?
Yep. 13, 15, or
If
16.
you'd like Adam or I here, it'll need to be, most likely 15, 16,
Okay,
one of those 2 days, because we have OSBA that week.
okay. There we go, we're down to 2.
Okay.
So I'll send out those and see if Ian can make one or both of those. And then I'll just send a Outlook invite like I have been, a calendar request. Has that been working for everyone?
Mhm.
Okay. So let me say confirm with Ian. Okay.
I had a question about the topic for that day too, because at the very beginning when we talked about this, one of the things we talked about is using this group to preview a little bit of program study stuff, which
Mhm.
that's the only meeting we would have that align with that timeline. But I know we already from our last conversation have quite sounds like a full agenda for going through some of those topics in
Mhm.
detail. So just
Well,
see if
and
that's something this group still wants to do.
I think it definitely ties into that elective conversation and the CCP conversation, so maybe we can blend that in.
Okay. So for this group, the timeline for our program study at the secondary level is to have that essentially every I dotted and T crossed by the beginning of December, which gives us lots of time to present to the board, print out things and do all the other things. And so we start that probably, we're already in that process, but by the time November rolls around, it'll be, 97% done. And so what we would be able to do is be able to share out those programmatic changes that are happening at the secondary level, and you'd be able to, provide feedback.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we could give like a, oh, sorry, Vanessa, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say that sounds great.
Yeah, so, go ahead.
Would that include then, so first of all, you're looking at, you've already been working on developing it, so would it include like assessments from before about the whys and why you're doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I would include all like the reasoning behind it, which I thought would be good from like just a context and educational perspective from you, like why were these decisions made? What, was this decision actually, started 3 years ago and it's finally the time in which it happened and we've been working on it for 3 years to get to the point to make the change? Like, we provide a lot of that context to you about the why behind it, because I think that would be, it lines up with that whole idea of diving into those things.
And then the assessment from, that's what we're talking about, the assessments that led to those decisions.
You mean like, it's like state assessments?
Yes.
Type of assessments? So some of the decisions are made based on the data that we're getting from report card, OST types of things. Some changes are made for other reasons outside of that, yeah.
The program of studies basically is a listing of the courses that are gonna be offered for the students to select.
Yeah.
So you have to have your core courses, which are the OST tested areas. But what you may see is you may see some type of intervention
Yeah.
OST class that's been added because we see scores are low in this one area or something like that. But all the core classes are offered. It would really be appropriate to look and see what the electives are that are offered, and are the electives up to date?
Mhm.
Do they represent the future? Do they represent, when I was in high school?
Mhm.
Yep.
That's the kind of thing that we really have kind of some say-so over, because the core classes are required, by the state. So that would really be how the assessment is used to see whether or not there's an intervention or an enrichment type class that needs to be added because of what we're seeing with the.
Sometimes there's state law related things
Right.
too, like when last year, we added financial lit
Financial
as a
literacy.
requirement, so then added financial lit as a requirement for all students, and we changed that in the program study. Not only from a class offering perspective, we've always had that class for a long time, but it was more of a changing the graduation requirements section of the program study, things like that.
So that's gonna address then some of those questions that are on here about the electives, about the
Mhm.
specials.
Yeah.
about the AP,
Yep,
about.
exactly.
Okay.
Not
So you'll
not
see-
about the elementary specials.
But not about elementary. Yeah,
They're-
so a
they're in
lot.
the program themselves
Okay.
in
Yeah,
elementary.
I mean, reading into some of these, some of them I feel like I was pretty certain they were talking about elementary specials, and then some of them I felt pretty certain they're talking about the secondary specials, just on, so this will not address the elementary one specifically, but I think you can talk to the changes that are being made at the elementary.
I would be happy
We
to.
don't call it program study, but it's the same concept.
And elementary specials are a staffing situation, so do you have enough staff to make music, art, physical education, SEL, and STEM, and tech available, each day? And do you have enough time in that elementary schedule to take a look and see if you can get it more than one time? How do you adjust that elementary day to take care of that? So that's a staffing and a scheduling situation at the elementary.
And in saying that, would you say it's also getting those core classes in before you can add those in? So the amount of time that's left also
Correct.
dictates how many electives they can have in that day after you take out the required, the lunch,
Yeah.
the recess. That amount of time left is the only time they can have the specials in
Yeah.
there.
You have about 45 minutes a day that you can have a special class. So you have to figure out what those specials are for those 5 days that you have that block of time available, because you have blocks of reading, you have blocks of math, blocks of social studies and science, especially when you get in the intermediate grades.
Yeah, and we could see it play out in like the most recent discussions with like RIMS and what we have to do and how that has changes in law that might affect how we create schedules for students and things like that. It's a fun challenge.
And I myself like having that change in specials, because different kids have different interests. If you're a kid that don't like art and you say, I gotta take it for the whole year, I'm the kid that didn't like art, I wouldn't be happy. Just, it'd be like for me anyway.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you'll see some of the program of studies, we're really ramping up, trying to increase participation in AP classes and offerings of CCP courses, as part of the new metrics that are gonna come onto our state report card that kind of judge us in this area. So you'll see those, we'll talk about those in the program.
So that is a little
too.
bit, it's a response to data, just maybe not the data that you're
No, that's
initially
it.
thinking about, but we can show you that data too, and I think you'll find it pretty fascinating.
That's exactly what I was asking.
Yeah, awesome. We got you.
All right, any other questions, comments? I think we've got a good agenda brewing for November, so thank you for all that. Anything else before we adjourn?
Vanessa, we hope you're feeling better.
Yes,
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
being
you.
with us.
I hope so too.
there's stuff going around for sure, so.
It
everybody's
really,
stay healthy.
it's that time of the year, so.
Yeah. All right, if we're ready to, I could take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, and could I have a second?
A second.
Okay. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion approved. Thank you all.
Thank you very
We
much.
went right at that
Thank you.
hour, we did good.